Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Robert. And to return the compliments, I must say that Holland had a successful World Cup this year. Why you're not satisfied? I think you had a successful World Cup, but our colleague should feel more proud, Olaf, because at the end of the day, Germany won the World Cup. But when I was reviewing the data in the past few days, it was interesting to see the stats. Which teams you think consist the top 5 national teams in terms of the World Cup wins? Any guesses? Brazil, indeed, and we have many Brazilian in the audience, so well done. 5 wins for Brazil, 4 for Germany, 4 for Italy, 2 Argentina, 2 Uruguay, although Uruguayan wins are really at the very early stages. Unfortunately, only 1 win for Netherlands, and as you know, no wins, no success for the Greek team. Okay, let's start. Time to start with the video. Please take your time, relax. It's only 1.5 minutes. Apologies for this. I did. Okay. I did, but it does not. So I'll go back. I do it manually in the premature way. Okay.
Do to my sign?
I wrote the same, but in different words.
Thanks, love.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, you might know the story. I'm going to say a story about the effect of environmental heat stress on performance, on football performance. So for those who are aware about this area, there's no big need to stay in the room. And we have excellent physiologists in Aspetar who do a great job in this area. We do have also excellent people doing work on performance analysis with the Aspire Academy and other stakeholders. So my intention is to say a similar story, but in a different way. So if I start the story from the early 80s, the big challenge in the early 80s was to study the exercise-induced fatigue models. And A.V. Hill, the Nobel Prize winner in 1927, used to investigate this question with different exercise models. A summary of these models is presented in this slide. You can see the key thing based on these theories was that fatigue was develop when there was a mismatch between the working muscle demands and the ability of the heart to pump enough blood and oxygen to the working muscles. So that was the prevailing theory. The prevailing theory until, I would say, until a few years ago. Exercise in the heat has been a model, has been used as a model to study the ability of the human beings to sustain exercise, the ability to tackle fatigue. And this is one of the oldest or the first studies on the effect of heat on endurance performance. In this study, they had their athletes to exercise on the bike as long as they can under 4 different experimental conditions in a cool environment, in a neutral environment, and in hot environment. And as you can see, exercise performance was significantly lower by around 25% when they did exercise in the heat compared with the condition when they did exercise in neutral condition. So the take-home message from this study and the subsequent studies is that as heat goes up, endurance performance declines. But let me remind you that this study was on the cycle ergometer, and they are doing constant pace exercise, which means the investigators has set the work rate. So they said to them, I want you to work at this rate for as long as you can. This is constant load exercise, and this is different to what happens in real life, where people decide their pace. Usually athletes decide the way they want to do exercise, the pace, which means the intensity of exercise. So the key question, one question that came to my mind is, what about self-paced exercise? What happens when we let people to choose their way of doing exercise? And this is one study published by a very good group under the leadership of Professor Tim Noakes. And in this group, they had their athletes doing exercise, self-paced exercise on the cycle ergometer under cool environment and hot environment. And this is the power output at different stages of exercise, as you can see in this graph. What is interesting is that contrary to the classical theory, you can see that they start slowing down in the hot environment at the very early stages. And I'm saying it's contrary because we do know from classic thermal physiology that when temperature goes up, then you slow down. This is the sequence of the events. But at this stage of the work, apparently the body temperature was not that high. But even though individuals start slowing down, decide a different pace. And more interestingly, at the end of the trial, the power output increases, which is something that was not expected. So the conclusion of this group was that this adaptation appears to form part of an anticipatory response, which adjusts muscle recruitment and power output to reduce the heat production, thereby ensuring that thermal homeostasis is maintained during exercise in the heat. So this is the key word to me, homeostasis. This is the key thing when we study football players, when we study athletes under stressful conditions, which is exercise. The human body does not understand about how to score or how to tackle. The human body has been produced to maintain homeostasis. So let's say when we run for a long time around the aspire zone, the human body is trying to maintain mean arterial pressure. If we succeed in maintaining mean arterial pressure, then our heart will be able to pump enough blood to the working muscles. When we do other type of exercise, like high intensity exercise, one of the key things that the human body is trying to maintain is, let's say, the pH of the working muscle. So homeostasis is the main thing under the study of the human models, of the humans during exercise, So what happens in football players while they are doing exercise in the heat? I must say that Aspetar is one of the leaders in this area, and Sébastien Racines with Julien Perriard are doing excellent work on this. And this is a nice study published by a group of other scientists and Sébastien. And they had the players playing 2 matches under hot and neutral conditions, and they had GPS devices they were carrying, and they monitored different performance parameters, both physical and technical. And this is a summary of results. I don't want you to go into many details, but at the top is the total distance run under hot condition, which is the open bar, and cold, which is the black. And this is high intensity, and this is sprint distance. And as you can see, high intensity running was lower. The same for total distance running was lower under heat, compared with thermoneutral environment. But the interesting thing is the technical aspects, and this is the rate of successful passes. And as you can see, the rate of successful passes was higher in the hot environment compared with the thermoneutral environment. So that was a very, very interesting study. So going back to our business and the core business of this talk today, this is the map of Brazil, where the World Cup was held this year. And when we are looking at the different sites, I think 12 different sites for the World Cup matches, you have noticed, I believe many have noticed, that some of them we are under high risk of high environmental heat stress, like in Manaus and in this area, Fortaleza, and the area around Fortaleza. So when we reviewed the data of the past at least 10 years, we identified this need, and in collaboration with the FIFA Medical Research Center, we set up a study with the aim to investigate the effect of environmental heat stress on performance during the tournament. This study is under review, but the methodology was a key parameter was to monitor environmental conditions, dry, wet, and global temperature. We did this, or the as member of the medical staff did this 60 minutes before the start of the play. All measurements were taken with the same handheld thermometer, and WBGT, the wet bulb globe temperature, was calculated. Let me remind you that WBGT is an index to estimate the environmental heat stress. Of course, it's not an index to evaluate how the players perceive the heat. It's how hot or not hot is the environment. And this has been decided many years ago, and this is the formula to calculate this index. The formula takes into account mainly the humidity, so 0.7 for humidity, 0.2 for radiation, and 0.1 for ambient temperature. So WBGT is an index which takes into account not only the temperature, but also the humidity and the solar radiation. To calculate the heat stress during the tournament, we used 2 indices. One was the absolute value of WBGT, and the second one was the heat stress estimation or the level of risk based on this equation of Gonzalez, which we believe is more accurate because it takes into account not only the WBGT, but also the relative humidity. And I don't want to drive you into more details because we have a very mixed group today, but let's say for a WBGT of 24 degrees Celsius, when relative humidity is 50%, the risk is low. and when for the same WBGT, when the relative humidity is above 80%, the risk is high. So just for you to understand the difference, the use of this formula. Performance indices were also recorded from the tracking system used by FIFA, and the different categories were identified as low, medium, and high intensity running distance, sprint, number of sprints, and peak running speeds. We have categorized the analysis into two key questions. One question is, does heat affect the nature of the game? Because if heat affects the nature of the game, then there is an issue. And the second is, does heat affect football performance? So let's look at the evidence regarding the nature of the game, which based on our data is described by the match actual playing time, which is the time that the ball is in play under the three different environmental conditions of heat stress, low heat stress, moderate, and high heat stress. No difference, no effect of environmental heat stress. The number of goals scored, which describe the nature of the game, no effect of environmental heat stress. But if you look at the physical performance data, there are some interesting things. The total distance run was not different under the three different environmental heat stress categories, but looking at the specific analysis of the distances, you can notice that low intensity increases as the heat goes up, medium intensity running distance stays the same, but high intensity distance goes down as WBGT increases. The take-home message from this slide, to make it the long story simple, is that as the heat goes up, high intensity running distance went down. Okay, so this is the take-home message from this slide. More on the physical performance data, the number of sprints and the peak speed. Number of sprints were lower at the high WBGT, so as the heat goes down, the number of sprints goes down, but the peak speed is not affected. Finally, some technical data, no effect of environmental heat stress on the number of passes, but higher rate of successful passes when playing under heat. Okay, let's make a summary to summarize these results. We have nature of the game, physical performance indices, and technical performance indices, total distance for the nature of the game, total distance run, active muscle time, and number of cuts, which I didn't show you the results, no difference. Physical performance, high intensity distance, number of sprints decline, lower when exercise, when the matches were in the heat. Peak speed was maintained, not affected. Number of passes, no difference between the different environmental stress, heat stress conditions, but the rate of successful passes was higher in the heat compared with the other group environmental heat stress categories. So what we have learned in looking at this data, we do believe that elite players, as those players in the World Cup, do pace themselves, they choose their pace. And they do this, in particular, we have noticed that they reduce high intensity activity in order to preserve key performance indicators. And the key performance, some of the key performance indicators, I'm not saying is everything, some of the key performance indicators are the peak running speed and the rate of successful passes. Going back to the homeostasis model, if you can make an extrapolation of this physiological model into a more football-specific model, the players have decided that they need to maintain these key performance indicators. And the performance indicators, as you know in football, is not the total distance run, is the intensity that you run, and especially the peak running speed. Of course, I believe we did replicate some of the findings that Sebastian has published before. And this is a reminder of the early study that I showed to you, showing quite similar results. So the key question is, do players at the end of the day, do they get fatigue? And that's the next question we need to ask. And it is really interesting. If you look at the congestive fixture data, there are at least 2-3 studies that at least I know. The studies show when the players play matches 2 times per week, at least one of these studies published in the American Journal of Sports Medicine, there's no change, there's no difference in performance compared with the situation when they play only 1 match per week, and these data are for elite athletes. So the key question is, do the players fatigue at the end of the day? So we tried to answer this question in another analysis that we did with colleagues from Excellence in Football Project. We had a high-level European team followed for youth under 19. For the whole year, we do monitor RPE during the season, every single session, and the fatigue index 1 time per week. And as you can see, the interesting thing was that training load went down progressively as the season progressed, but fatigue was the same. Fatigue was maintained. So our interpretation is that the sense of fatigue is the regulated factor, as in a homeostatic system. This is the regulated factor in a homeostatic system, and everything has been adjusted in order to keep this stable. Or we don't monitor, we don't capture fatigue and load as accurate as we believe. I don't know what is true. It's a speculation. So this is the model of that A.V. Hill put forward in 1924. What was missing at this time, and Professor Knox started debating in the early 2000s, was the brain. So it seems that there is a regulator from the brain. There is a command from the brain that regulates the working muscle pace in order to match the working muscle activity with the ability of the heart to pump muscle, at least for the type of activity that we are talking about. And in this is the more advanced model by the Professor Tim Knox. And if we believe that there are key regulated factors even in football, where the maintenance of key performance indicators is a key thing, then the players have different inputs before exercise and during exercise, and in integrated all these inputs, they decide about their pace. The inputs before exercise is the physiological state, how well they feel. The expected is not distance here, is not duration, is the expected intensity in football. The previous experience and the motivation and the external competition are key things integrated in the brain of the football players, possibly. And during the match, they receive feedback from the muscles. We know that there are sensors in the muscles that send signals about lactic acid, about the muscle glycogen content, continuously to the brain, the rate of heat accumulation, the hydration state, and the self-belief. They integrate and they decide their pace. Okay, back to normal life now. Should we bother the coaches with all of these things? No. Coaches are very busy. They have to guide the players. They have to deal with other things outside the players. No, we should not bother. We should provide them with solutions. And I like this KISS rule, which is keep it simple as it is possible. Then, if the players pace themselves, what we can do? I believe this is an idea, and I'm happy to discuss more ideas. Then we need more objective data, and we need more sophisticated data analysis to treat all this data. And you know, all this story is not something new. We monitor internal load, external load. I do believe, and many people are doing the training outcome monitoring cardiovascular system through different ways, central nervous system, injury risk assessment tools. And since I like to talk about examples, I would like to draw an example of work that we did in the Excellency Football together with the rehabilitation department here in Aspetar. We wanted to investigate simple tools to use in the club before and after training or the next day, but tools that will take 2 to 3 minutes to monitor the responses. So we did an evaluation study recently published in the Journal of Sports Science, where we had the players to do the to measure the hip flexibility with a very simple test, and we have identified that hip flexibility becomes lower, although you see an inverted graph, it means lower when the player's load is increased. So this is an example of a very simple tool that we can use also to integrate sports science and sports medicine. Okay. So what's next? The second part of my talk. I do believe that there has been a great advance in football in Qatar. You might not know, but the Qatar Football Association was established in 1970. The first official match was played in 1970 against Bahrain. This is a picture I was very privileged to get from the technical director of Al Sadd of a match at the Khalifa Stadium in 1971, and I would like to thank him very much. And it has been very big advancement throughout this very short period of time, and this is due to the very hard work. What's next? If I can contribute into this discussion, I would say it's good if we can develop a model that fits the Qatari player. And this is an example of a model that Adidas, let's say, has used to promote their product. It's a new store of Adidas, so it's good if we can develop a new model for the Qatari football players, and I'm talking about only the football clubs that we are dealing, and only for the sports science related components, which is our business, and I will remain into this. So let's look at the future of the game, and looking at a very recent paper which you might be aware from the UK. They have done an analysis of the English Premier League over the last 7 to 8 years, the different physical components. Unfortunately, we don't have data, so much data for the technical and tactical components. And as you can see, the high intensity distance, which is we consider a key, one of the key parameters for performance in high level football, they have identified a 28% increase over the last 7 or 8 years, which is, to me, it's a huge, I believe you agree, it's a huge increase in the demands of the game. So the game is becoming faster. So what players are we looking for? We're looking strong players able to play at high intensity for consecutive 90 minutes. We want players who think and react fast, and players who are able to perform well, of course, under high pressure. This is always what we need. And what is our task is to keep them injury-free to perform well. I would like to say that the role of sports science is to push the boundaries of human performance. That's why in the next few slides I will try to bring some ideas how to push the boundaries. Of course, there is not only the physical components of the game, but our role is to discuss about the physical components. And as I said, I would like to remain into this and discuss about the players that we work with in the clubs. This is a very simplified model as the big idea of the model that we do follow with the different priorities and the different components that affect performance, like quality of training, quality of recovery, physiological, psychological profile, health and well-being. All these are parameters that are important to football performance, but I'm sure you all agree, like Jose Mourinho keeps saying, that we need to focus. If we don't focus, if we don't make priorities, we might be in a difficult position in the future. And I think the key word again is focus. And I do believe that it is better if we focus on quality of training. Quality of training is very important to my, at least to my understanding at this stage. And quality of training means different things to different people, but I would like to draw your attention on the content that meets the match demands and intensity that meets the match demands are crucial. And I would like to show you again an example how we adapt, we adjust our experiences from other places into the reality of the Qatari football players in the clubs. And this is simply the attendance rate in different clubs and the average attendance rate through the season. And as you all know, the attendance rate goes down at some stage. Training is relatively inconsistent, but that's the thing, that's a reality here in Qatar. Now the question is, what can we do? How can we train our players? This is a reality. How can we fit our projects, our program, based on this reality? So, given this inconsistency, we discussed with the colleagues in Excellency Football, and we did a study which is now under review, and we hope it will serve as a pilot study. We said if there is a, and the guys, Darren, Paul, and João Marques did a lot of work on this. We said if they come inconsistently during the week and we follow the classic model, which means we train every component, all components in a week, we might miss some components because the players don't come. But if we concentrate our training into one component, let's say 4 weeks endurance training. So a player misses one training, misses another training, but still gets the stimulus of the endurance training. What can we see? This is called block periodization in the literature. You might be aware there has been a lot of work in other sports. Only recently some work has been published in football. We hope we succeed something good with this paper, by the way. So we had one group doing the conventional training for 4 weeks and the other group doing block periodization, 4 weeks of training every day, endurance with different tools, small-sided games and high-intensity bouts. And we measured endurance performance, leg power, and agility. What we have found, no difference in endurance performance in the control group, 8% improvement in the experimental group, the group that did intensified training. And more interestingly, this program that focused only on endurance did not affect leg power and agility. So leg power and agility remained the same. So this is might be a tool in order to give more training to the players in order to improve their fitness. Improvement of fitness should be a key parameter into our model. And I've tried to summarize the information in the literature and what you know. If players have low fitness, then we expect low performance. I mean, it's common sense. But you also expect increased injury risk. If you ask the medical doctors and the physiotherapists, that's common knowledge. And if we have players with increased injury risk, then the loop goes like this. Then they are not free for training, they are not ready for training, so they do not train, so again low performance. So, and the loop goes on. But if we try the other model and build high fitness, then we expect that they will achieve high performance. And of course, as you expect, a reduced injury risk. And if they don't have injuries, then they will be able to train, which means they have more opportunities to to achieve their full potential. So that's the loop, and that's the model. Another issue in the literature or in everyday life is the big data. Big data we call big data, all the data that we get from GPS, from Prozone, from physical testing, from heart rate monitoring, from tests. It's a big analysis. I hope it's not paralysis. What we do with the big data. We must integrate in order to provide meaningful results to the managers and the head coaches for better decision making. And I'm going to show you some examples in the next few minutes before I reach my conclusion, because I do believe that in the past we had diagnostic, more descriptive analytics. We use the data to describe. We say, okay, our player is doing this in the test, how we rate him this. Okay, this is descriptive analytics. I think we are moving into an era of more predictive analytics, and as in other areas, not in football yet, call it more in simulation modeling. There are some studies like the last year, one study again from a Brazilian group. I have to give more to Brazilians because the World Cup was in Brazil, so that's why I choose this paper. Of course, there are also other groups that are doing very good job. In swimming, we have tried a model of prediction about 10 years ago when I was younger. It is interesting to show you some of this information because we can extrapolate some of this in football. We had young swimmers, 13 years of age. We measure morphological, anthropometric characteristics, performance indicators. We used an analysis which is called split sample approach. One group was the experimental group to test the model. The other group was the validation group. Then we mixed the group and we plotted the predicted 100 meters freestyle performance with the observed, the actual one, the best time in the championship. And that was the prediction, quite good prediction. And for those who are familiar with the Blood-Altman approach, I would say a relatively valid model, at least for this zone of performance. So this is an example of predictive analytics in other sports. But as you might know, now we're moving into another area. Teams, I know that some teams are using, and in the literature it has been used, the artificial neural networks. This is in computer science, models in computer science, but models that have been adapted from biological science. So in computer science, in neural network techniques, they're using different inputs like neurons. So we measure morphological, anthropometric, whatever. These are the neurons, and these are the synapses. And as you know, in the central nervous system, there are both inhibitory and excitatory synapses. So how they do it in computer science, they use the different coefficients to describe the relationships between the neurons or the input data to the outcome data. And the outcome might be performance, might be injury, or whatever. I believe this is an interesting area for the future. So in summary, I do believe it's not how much data we get. I try to summarize what you say when I am out in the field. This is what you say. It's not how much data we get, but what we can do with all this data. And of course, we should keep the balance between science and intuition, because at the end of the day, coaching is an art and science. Science can help, but football and coaching is art. And every model is successful, based on my experience at least, when the team wins. Winning means for the youth that we bring players in the first team. For the senior team means that we win the league. So every model, this is how the model are validated in real life in elite football. Okay, so I would like to skip this and talk for one slide about the World Cup legacy, because I do believe we need to leave something behind. One thing that we can leave, one aspect is the platform for the sports science delivering the football clubs, the clubs that we are dealing as NSMP, as the National Sports Medicine Program, but also is good also to discuss how we move from high performance plan to local community benefits. And I think this is also an interesting area that we are doing, have started some work with the Healthy Lifestyle Program, and I'm very glad that things are progressing. But just to let you know that this is also the concern of the IOC and of the different federations like FIFA and FINA for the time being. Ladies and gentlemen, I do believe that is now the time, there is time to think and plan. And once we decide the way we need to go, then I believe we should go very decisively and remain faith into achieving our objective. And the key thing into achieving our objective, I believe, is to create competition. Competition in the office with our colleagues, competition in the program, competition in the project, competition in the youth club. We need to create competition and think about competition, how to create the right opportunities every day, how to raise the bar in order to achieve our objectives. That saying, thank you very much.